Hello everyone, my name is Jana Stopowski and I'm your data visualization instructor. In today's video, we're going to briefly cover some basic chart types displaying either correlation or distribution of our data. When we look at correlation, we typically study the relationship between A and B. Let's look at an example. We're going to start off with our coffee shop data set. And in order to show correlation or to study relationship between A and B, we're going to build what's called a scatter plot chart. In its very nature, a scatter plot is a chart type that is more of exploratory nature. That means it's allowing us to explore or understand our data set better rather than using this type of chart to communicate our data. Let's build a simple scatter plot from our coffee shop data set. We're going to pull net sales into columns, and we're going to pull quantity into rows. We have x-axis for net sales, y-axis for quantity, but only one data point in our view. We need to make the view more granular so that we can start studying some relationships between different data points when it comes to net sales and quantity. If we go and look at our data source, we can see, and we've talked about it in previous videos, that each row in this data set basically represents an item that was sold in this coffee shop on a particular day, a particular time of the day, in particular quantity, and with a particular price tag. So each row is one item sold, one coffee drink, one iced mocha 20 ounces, one flavored latte regular, etc., etc. And so these are the different items that we want to study. And so what we're going to do, we're going to use item ID pill to make our view more granular. So we're going to drag that into the detail and drop it right there. And here we've got a scatter plot. Now remember, this includes all the data from our data set. I think what I may want to do is pull in our date field. Since we only have 2 months of data available in our data set, I'm going to change the view to a month. And now we've got one scatter plot for April and one for May. And as we hover over, we can see names of items that that each data point represents. Now we only see item ID, so what we may want to do is pull in an item description into the tooltip. And now as I hover over each data point, I can see that this is a muffin. Item description, this is a muffin. Net sales, we sold over $3,000 worth of muffins and over 1,500 in quantity. Okay, so this is an item that we sell a lot of and we make most of money off. That's the case for April, let's see, and that's the case for the month of May. Okay, now we can start exploring our data a little more. As I said earlier, this chart is probably better suited for learning more about our data set, exploring this data set and becoming better at understanding it. So what we could do is go into our analytics tab and bring in an average line for our pane. And if you notice, we get an average line for our items, for our net sales, and then we get an average line for our quantity. And so what happens here is if the two average lines cross in the middle, that middle point now divides each of our scatter plots into 4 quadrants. And so what we could call them in this quadrant here, the biggest one represents above average net sales and above average quantity sold. So these are the items that sell the best. They bring in above average net sales and they sell in the above average quantities. What we could focus on is we could start, if we wanted to get more granular and understand more our data set, we could start maybe exploring a data set and look at the data in this quadrant where our quantity is above average, but our net sales are below average. So if we look at this data point, this represents some sort of almond, soy, half and half. That means we sell quite a bit of this, but it doesn't bring in enough money. So what could happen is, if we sell a lot of this, probably we could increase the price of it and help this data point eventually move to here, because it could start make some more money for us. Maybe this data point, some sort of syrup. We sell above average in quantity of syrup, but if we wanted to move it here, we might want to increase the price so that our net sales for this item increase as well. So as I said earlier, this type of chart, scatter plot, is much better for some sort of internal analysis where we're trying to learn more about our data set. It allows a great deal of exploration. If we happen to have a third measure, for instance, profit ratio, we could take it and drag it onto the size, and that would affect the size of the bubbles on our in our view. And the chart could look something like this. But our data set does not have a third metric, which is okay, but keep that in mind as you're trying to explore your data using scatterplot, that if you have more than 2 metrics, you can use scatterplot even with the third one and bring it into the view and distinguish your bubbles or your data points in size, in which case it's called a bubble chart or bubble scatter plot, because it creates bubbles of different sizes. So suddenly with that, you're able to pack 3 different metrics into the view and become even more analytical with exploring your data set. In the second part of this video, we're going to talk about building a chart that shows distribution. Distribution basically means that we're trying to show values in a data set and how often they occur in the data set. One of the most common charts to show distribution is called histogram, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it's very simple to build, and simply by Googling build histogram in Tableau, you're going to find a lot of different brief instructions on how to do that. What I want to show you today is this box and whisker plot, which may not be one of the more known chart types, but it's a very useful one because it's packed with a lot of information in just one single view. So let's look at how we're going to build this, and then we'll explain what we can get out of this chart. Let's use our real estate data set to build this chart. What we're gonna do is we'll drag value into rows, and then we'll drag sale date. I'm gonna drag a month, and we're gonna change it into month and stretch it across the entire view. And then we're going to change the view to a circle. And again, we need to make this view granular as possible. We want to explore every single data point in this data set. And in this case, when we look at our data source, each transaction, each home sold is one row of our data set. That is represented by our transaction ID. So if we go back to our sheet, we'll take transaction ID and drag it into the detail. Now I'm just going to make a few adjustments to make it easier to see. I'm going to create a border around here so we can see. We need to do a little bit of filtering here. What we'll do is drag sale date into the view, and let's say we'll just filter to year 2018. We'll drag county into filters and select Baldwin County. And let's just say that I'm also going to drag a city into the county, and let's say I want to explore Orange Beach. Okay, so now this view now represents sales in year 2018 in Baldwin County in the city of Orange Beach. And for each month, we have a number of dots, and each dot represents the actual transaction. And so now, when I hover over each dot, I get more realistic numbers. Okay? In the month of January of 2018, this house was sold for $415,000. Okay? Of course, more homes sell for less, and so more towards the bottom of the chart, the dots are sort of cluttered on top of each other because most transactions happen in these price ranges. So now we're going to bring in what's called a box plot. I'm going to click on the Analytics tab and drag box plot onto my view. And here is we get what's called a whisker, and this is what this means. The most important component of this whisker is the middle line, the line that divides the box into two shades of gray, and that's a median that basically slices every column of our consisting of our dots into half. This represents a median price. You can see that if you hover over. So each line that represents the upper or lower border of the box represents one quartile from the median. That means that the entire box represents the middle 50 of the transactions that happened in that particular month. Okay, so anything within each box represents the middle 50 of the transactions that took place this month. And then each upper whisker and lower whisker basically represent all the data that are 50% above or below the middle 50. And then anything outside of the filters would be considered outliers. We can see that the price range of the middle 50% of all the transactions that took place in the month of September, the price range for all those transactions was much broader than, for instance, in June. To demonstrate the practicality of whiskers, we could say something like, middle half of all the homes that were sold in the month of June, their prices really only ranged from $260,000 to $412,000. Whereas in September, the middle half of all the homes sold in that month really ranged from $240,000 to $837,000. This can really help us see how irregular the real estate market is in some of the months of the year. Box and whisker plot may not be the prettiest chart type, but it's packed with a lot of information and allows the user as an analyst to spot some asymmetries or some significant outliers within our data set. So just like the scatter plot, the box and whisker plot helps us explore our data set and draw some conclusions about the distribution of the data. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.